Greetings, it's an honor to be with you today. And today the title is Fruits of the Flesh. And today we're talking about disobedient to parents. Or we can entitle this one Disobedience. All right. I'm reading from the book of Galatians chapter 5 verse 19a, and it says, "Now the works of the flesh are manifest." Or in other words, the spirits that are at work in Galatians 5 and 19 are outwardly manifest. And we know this by the fruit they produce. All right. And we're going to get into the fruit. But first, let's understand this principle. The spirits or works, of the flesh of Galatians 5 produce the fruit of 2 Timothy 3. And we're going to hop into test 2 Timothy 3, but I think it's important we understand that the spirits that we see at work that are listed in Galatians 5 and 19 and throughout, they are in actuality ratified by the fruit that we see in 2 Timothy 3. The 2 Timothy 3 are the fruit of Galatians 5 and 19. All right? I hope you got that. So let's look at 2 Timothy 3 to get some clarity. It says, "This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves." So we see how love comes to play again. When we look at Galatians 5:22 and throughout, we see the fruit of the Spirit, which is what? Love. But the love that is talked about there is the love of God. In 2 Timothy 3, verse 2, "For men shall be lovers of their own selves." They're not operating in the love of God. They're operating in their own lusts. They love themselves and their agenda and their bellies. And we know this by the fruit, which is disobedient to parents. Now, what does it mean to be disobedient? Disobedient means refusing to obey rules or someone in authority. I think this one is very crucial and important when we understand the role of parents. And I think that's why the scripture admonishes us to not only train up a child in the way he shall go, because when he's old he won't depart from it, but also tells us that if we spare the rod, we spoil the child. Now, I know we practical with that, and we talking whoopings, especially for us Caribbean people or of African descent. We know that we get practical right away with that. And we know that that's not all that means. It's just speaking about discipline in all of its forms. I thank God for my parents because we got the whoopings. All right? And most Caribbean people can identify with me. But it's not just talking about the whoopings. It's talking about discipline across the board. The rod of correction and discipline. It's not just physical or practical. There are some things that we can implement so that understanding can come. And it's so that we can develop or cause boys and girls to become productive men and women in society, showing them that the principle of the law is to be observed, is to be followed, is to be appreciated, because without law and order, we would have chaos, we would have anarchy, we would have rebellion, and that doesn't do good for society. It becomes a terrible ill to society. It makes society a scary and a dark place. And what we see happening here in 2 Timothy 3, because remember we're talking about men becoming lovers of themselves, is actually a contradiction to the law of God. How do we know? The commandment says, "Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself." That's a commandment what Jesus said the law and the prophets hang on that, right? And when we go against that to loving ourselves only, and ain't nothing wrong with loving yourself, but loving yourself exclusively where we get the problem. The buck shouldn't stop with you. It should start with you. Because if you love yourself, you're going to love others. Am I right? Or am I right? If you love yourself, you're going to love and you're going to care for others. So Love, preschool, primary school song we sang. Love is something that you give it away. This is the only way that we know that it's truly love, right? But when we are disobedient to commands like this, when we are disobedient to the ones that God has put in our lives to rear us up in the fear and admonition of the Lord, there is no way we're going to have a course toward success. There's no way we're going to live successful lives if we're disobedient to these men and women that God has put here for us to cherish and to obey and to respect. All right? Ephesians 6:1 says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Now, granted, not everyone that wears the cap parent is a parent. I was just talking about this with someone the other day. There are some children that are in some unfortunate situations where they just got a man and a woman in the house and they're not parenting. I'm sorry, they're unfit parents. And as a result, the children are growing up in chaos. They're not being taught the fear of the Lord. They're not being reared, and they're not being brought up in the right way. And as a result, they're suffering. And there are many of you that can attest to this too. So when the scripture says, obey your parents in the Lord, it's actually giving the children some fine print here. It's actually giving them some criteria to follow. There are some things that these men and women that I was talking about just now that are not fit parents, that are doing things contrary to God and to nature, that you ought not to follow and obey, and you ought not to feel a way about it. Thank God for there's social services and things that are in place that can address these issues so that children can have a wholesome upbringing. So God, He knows, nothing is past Him. He knew that there would be instances where children would be unfairly treated. And here's criteria. Obey those things that are fitting, that are in the Lord, that are according to God. And you'll be all right. God will make a way out of no way, because this is right. And I thank God for godly parents, for parents that are doing their best to bring up these little people so that they can be productive citizens in society. This is not something to take for granted, because many people become products of the system, and by that I mean the childcare system, and then we have the system of law enforcement, and not on the positive side. They become casualties, and we don't need that. We need things in place that will help mitigate that. But for those of us that have the good parents and we are living lives of disobedience, listen to me, that's going to carry over into your generations. I'm sorry, you think that if you're disobedient to your parents, that your children are going to treat you better than you treated your parents? The devil is a lie. I'm sorry, I'm not going to give you no lie story here. You're going to reap what you sow. So we've got to stop this fruit of the flesh called disobedience, because in the long haul, disobedience is going to come back to haunt us.